Rosella let her search for Lolote's castle move her south along the wall of the impossible mountains. She was wondering how she would get the talisman from the witch when a narrow path came into view. It was the first path that she had seen that went up the direction she wanted to go. My daughter put her planning to the back of her mind and began to climb, always paying close attention to avoid getting her feet tangled in the long dress. She didn't have far to climb far. Around the path's first bend, the black twin towers of Lolote's keep shuddered into sight. They did not look inviting. Worse, though, were the two small, sturdy forms flying from there directly at her. Before Rosella had time to even think about eluding them, the two flying monkeys, that's what they looked like up close, but she never did find out exactly what they were, snatched her into the sky by her arms, and turning upwards, winged my poor darling straight to Lolote's throne room. Lolote's castle was a cold, hard place, much like the witch herself, only more pleasant. Her throne stood atop a high dais, which permitted her to gaze down like a carrion bird on any who stood before her. Long and gaunt in form, Lolote was dressed all in black, which gave her greenish complexion an even more diseased pallor. Her voice hissed from her throat like a sick snake. Her eyes were tight and red, not quite as soft as a cobra's glare. Her hands gripped the arms of her throne so tightly that her long nails gouged deeply into the woods. A stooped, deformed man stood near her, scratching his armpits. "What were you doing coming here?" she demanded of Rosella. "You look like a spy sent by Genesta." No, Your Majesty, I'm just an ordinary peasant girl. I was lost when your creatures grabbed me." Real fear clutched at my daughter as she stood under Lolote's gaze. It was obvious that the witch did not believe her story, and she waited fearfully for the full force of Lolote's wrath. The witch ordered her monkey guards to take Rosella to a grim cell, a torture chamber by its looks. Instruments of pain filled the stone room. The bones of unlucky victims hung in manacles from the walls and ceiling, and the place smelled of ultimate despair. Rosella glanced around what would be her fate and shuddered. She had stared sure death in the eyes before. It still did not look inviting. My baby was kept there for some time, not long in minutes, but long enough to make a firm impression. Then the guards came back and returned her to the throne room. Pointing to the misshapen figure Rosella had seen earlier, the witch announced that he was her son, Edgar, and that he believed my daughter had taken a liking to her. Rosella swallowed hard as she saw how Edgar stared at her. It was like the dumb love look a dog might give its mistress. At least she thought his stare wasn't evil, but that was small consolation. "Bring me the unicorn that lives in Tamir. Then I will set you free and give you a reward, peasant girl. You can never escape me. Now go!" Lolote called her flying henchmen and ordered them to take Rosella back to the foot of the mountain. Rosella stood there, watching her captors disappear into the sky. She knew she needed help and advice, and Genesta might be the one who could give it to her. Having made the decision, she started walking straight west to the sea, intending to reach Genesta's island. As she hurried, she came across a robin pecking at the ground, pulling up at a plump worm. Seeing this gave her an idea, and she decided to gather what worms she could carry with her to the home of the gruff fisherman and his wife. Bait was her idea. Maybe the man needed more bait. That was why he hadn't caught any fish, and that was why he was so gruff. Maybe he could tell her how to get to Genesta. It sounded good in theory, but in practice she was only able to come up with one worm. She carried it anyway, knowing she had to come up with a better plan. Unicorns are shy and bashful beasts, magical in both fact and appearance. Rosella's westward course brought the animal into view a second time that day, but As before, it bolted the moment she approached. Although she didn't want to, she had to capture the creature, and she needed Genesta's help to do that. She moved quickly from the unicorn's meadow and soon arrived at the seaside shanty. The man was not on the pier fishing. Both he and his wife were inside, and answered her polite knock with a surly, "Come in!" The man didn't want the worm. One worm would do nothing to change his luck, he said. Fishing had been so bad lately that he was afraid his wife and he might starve. If nothing else, that explained their mutual bad temper. We have here in Castle Daventry a magic chest. Full of gold, it never empties, always replenishing what is taken from it. Because of this, we have no need for the normal material wealth of the world. So, reaching into her dress, Rosella brought out the pouch of diamonds the dwarves had insisted she keep. "Here, take these. They should help you." They both fell quiet when they saw the gems. Rosella insisted they keep them, so the man told his wife to give my daughter his fishing pole. "Thank you," they gushed. "We won't be needing this anymore." Pointing west, they told her the island on the far horizon was Genesta's. They had no boat, they said, and they hoped she was a strong swimmer. Fishing is said to help relax, calm, and organize the mind. Rosella walked to the end of the long pier, baited the pole's hook with the worm, and cast her line into the sea. She cared not if she caught anything, she just needed a few moments to think of alternatives to swimming to the island. I have always told her that when puzzled or in doubt, it is wise to stop and think a problem through. Patience pays great rewards. This time it didn't pay her way across the waves, but after several casts, she did catch a fish. Rosella looked at it. "I'll be hungry soon," she thought. "Now I've got dinner." For want of a better place, it went into the pocket that had moments before held the worm. Then, fixing her eyes firmly on the hazy island in the west, she dove straight from the pier and stroked directly at it. My husband Graham, as I have noted, taught his love of swimming to my daughter. She is a strong swimmer, and her sure strokes swiftly shortened the distance to the fairy's island. Once a whale started to surface not far from her, but she quickly and briefly changed course to avoid it. The same with the one shark fin she spotted. A quick serve, a burst of speed, and the shark disappeared. At last my wet daughter stood on the golden beach of Genesta's isle. Birds of all kinds sang in the trees, a magnificent peacock strutted in the sand. She followed it in the direction of the dazzling turreted palace that stood in the island's center. It seemed made of ivory. As she followed the proud bird, a tail feather dropped from the peacock. It continued on its way without noticing the loss. Rosella picked it up. It was pretty, and it wasn't nailed down. Marvelous gardens surrounded the ivory palace with fragrant bushes, herbs, and flowers. Small paths wandered throughout. A marble statue of dolphins playing in the waves graced one of the garden's corners, and a small pond, home to a pure white swan, adorned another. Hovering above the doors to the palace were two tiny fairies, perhaps the same ones who had accompanied Genesta to her meeting with Rosella. They made no sounds at all, their tiny translucent wings beating in silent strokes. They made no effort to hinder my daughter from opening the great doors and entering. Inside, Rosella was greeted by two locked doors and a set of stairs leading up through an archway. The two tiny fairies had followed her inside, and now fluttered ahead of her and up one of the palace's ivory towers. Rosella followed their lead to the top of the staircase and Genesta's bedchamber. On the marble floor, a snow leopard sat guarding the fairy queen, who lay in a seashell bed. Genesta lay there silently sleeping, still pale and thin. She looked close to death. No sound but shallow, labored breathing came from her, and her fairies tried to back my daughter away from their mistress. Rosella was crushed with sorrow. Genesta was losing her hold on life and asleep, perhaps in a trance, was unable to offer her any aid or advice. All Rosella could do was return to the mainland and survive by her wits. Slowly she left Genesta's chamber, never expecting to see the good fairy alive again. Her steps took her to the beach where she had arrived, and she started swimming back to the mainland. Fatigue from the first swim had now caught up to my daughter. Following that came another whale. This time, Rosella was too tired to elude it, and blackness swallowed her. In truth, it was the whale that gulped her down, but that distinction meant nothing to Rosella at the time. All she knew was that she was alive, in the belly of a whale, breathing noxious, deadly fumes, and swimming in digestive juices. Some ghostly red light, its source unknown, gave meager illumination. Rosella knew she had to get out soon, before the Leviathan digested her. Ugh! The whale's flesh was slimy and slippery. The only place Rosella was able to climb out of the stomach soup was on the far side to the left. From there, she could see up the beast's gullet. This became her goal. Somehow she would get out of the whale's mouth, but first she had to climb up there. Of course, it wasn't easy, especially in a wet dress that insisted on tangling her knees and tying her ankles. Up and over, a slip would skid her into forever. So very slowly she crept up on that slick flesh, every inch momentous victory. Up and over, and then success. She could stand. Looking up, Rosella saw part of the whale's gullet dangling above her. A tonsil or something like that. It didn't matter. Whatever it was, she determined to tickle the whale with the peacock feather she was carrying, hoping to make the giant beast gag and vomit her up. She was wrong. The Leviathan didn't gag, it sneezed. The less said, the better. Moments later, Rosella was back out in open air, swimming in a sea of whale snot. But she was alive and could see an island nearby. She swam there as fast as she could. Having cleaned herself as best she could and drying in the hot sun, Rosella took quick stock of her situation. She was neither in the dark belly of the beast, breathing poisonous fumes, nor up to her chin in stomach acid. That was good. On the other hand, the island was small, deserted, and without water. Numerous hulls of wrecked ships, mostly submerged, were decaying on the reefs that ringed it. On top of all that, she still had a dead fish in her pocket. My daughter did not cry, would not cry. She did not shout her frustration to the heavens. She did not curse her turn of fortune. Instead, she took the previously forgotten fish from her pocket and threw it at the only other living thing there, a raucous pelican that seemed to be mocking her. Squawk! Greasily, noisily, the bird snatched the fat fish from the air, and as it did so, something fell from its beak onto the sand. It sparkled as it lay there, shiny and metallic. As the bird flew away, Rosella went to see what had fallen. She took it. It was a whistle made of silver, although how the bird had come by it will always be a mystery. Her curiosity getting the better of her, my daughter searched the rest of the island. Looking on the ground inside the remains of a wrecked rowboat, she saw something else glisten. Picking it up, she marveled at her discovery of a golden bridle, and again wondered how such a splendid thing came to be in that desert place. Perhaps one of the wrecks had once been a great treasure ship, dead now, victim of a forgotten storm. As Rosella was growing up, climbing trees, and playing in the nearby woods, Graham and I had always told her that if she were ever in trouble or needed help, just whistle and we'd come to her aid. The silver whistle reminded her of those happy times of childhood. She walked to the edge of the island and blew on it. We didn't come, of course, but a dolphin did. Perhaps the whistle brought it. Perhaps it was loyal to Genesta and knew Rosella to be her friend and in trouble. It matters not why it came, only that it did. Many times have I read tales of these gentle, friendly creatures helping human folk in distress. I thought the tales to be fables. I have since changed my mind. Flipping and dancing into the shallow water near shore, it seemed to be gesturing for Rosella to ride it to safety. My daughter grabbed hold of the dolphin, and it bore her back over the waves to Tamir. Safely on shore, Rosella looked back to see the dolphin leaping into the air and flipping its shiny tail to the sky. Then it dived, disappearing under the waves. Rosella waved goodbye. Where was she? That's what Rosella needed to know. Looking south, she could see the fisherman's shack, so she must be a little north of the fishing pier. With that settled, she began walking east, looking for the unicorn. She could see stone pillars in that direction, so she decided to look for the unicorn there. If she could get near enough, she would use the bridle to capture it. Her eastward trek brought Rosella to an artificial pool made of marble. Carved columns, also marble, flanked it on two sides. They looked to be waiting to hold up a roof. Perhaps they were just keeping the sky from falling. On another occasion, Rosella might have swum into the pool's inviting waters, but not this time. Too many lives rested in her hands. As she stood there thinking, a small figure fluttered down on stubby wings and began its own leisurely dip in the pool. At first, Rosella thought it might be one of Lalote's flying monkeys coming to look at her. That impression passed quickly. This being was smaller, chubbier, had no fur, and was completely naked. Her learning served her well. Rosella knew that she was looking at Cupid, the god of love. Here she was sure was help for her. Rosella rushed from the shadows that had concealed her and swiftly walked where Cupid was bathing. The god looked up at Rosella, surprise on his baby face. Quick as a hummingbird, his wings blurred and Cupid flew away from the pool, leaving Rosella with a face full of spray and nobody to talk to. Drat! It's so hard to talk to people around here. Cupid fled so quickly that he abandoned his tiny bow on the side of the pool. Next to it was a quiver with 2 arrows, love darts, as Rosella well knew. This discovery wiped all disappointment from her mind. With one of Cupid's arrows, she could enchant the unicorn, and with the golden bridle, she could take the proud beast to Lalote. Once there, she would have another chance to get Genesta's talisman. With new confidence, Rosella decided to go where she had seen the unicorn before. She ran swiftly south until she reached the river and followed this west until she came to the meadow. No unicorn. Perhaps it sensed she was there. Quietly she left, waited a few minutes, and then returned, slowly and silently. This time the horned horse was there, moving through the meadow, its majestic head held high in the air. The bow was strung, the arrow ready. Rosella moved as close as she dared, and then shot the unicorn a true hit upon its flank. Instantly, the magic creature stopped, shook itself, and then turned to face its attacker. Much sadness dwelled in its eyes as it looked to Rosella, but it did not bolt away. Instead, it stood waiting, nickering softly and pawing the ground. Slowly, my distraught daughter walked up to it, patting its nose gently and putting the bit in its mouth. Rosella mounted the unicorn and, sobbing, pointed it toward the impossible mountains. All is for the best, she told herself. All is for the best. Three of the witch's goons set upon them as Rosella and the unicorn started up the path to Lalote's. Again, Rosella was grabbed and flown into the sky, at the mercy of the flying monkeys, straight to the throne of the wicked witch. Edgar still stood beside his foul mother, his puppy eyes moist, as if with tears of relief at Rosella's return. "I'm still not convinced you're telling me the truth, my ugly little peasant girl," the witch snorted. At this, Edgar flinched and glared at Lalote. Bring me the hen that lays the golden eggs, and then I will give you freedom and the promised reward. Fail, and you shall die the death of a spy. The hen is kept by an ogre and his wife in the great forest. Go there now, and bring it to me. Away with you!" Rosella was roughly snatched by the flying monkeys and dropped again at the foot of the mountains. Again she felt anger and frustration at herself, having been so close to the witch twice, but unable to figure a way to steal the talisman from her. She hadn't even seen it. Rosella's fury passed quickly. When her temper flashes, it sears with intensity, and then focuses into determination. All I have to do is steal a precious golden egg-laying chicken away from a family of ogres, and probably right out from under their noses. But if I do that, I'll have another chance to get the talisman from her. Okay, girl, stop thinking about it, and do it. At least she had an idea of where the ogre's house was. While she had been looking at the tombstones in the graveyard earlier that day, Rosella had seen the silhouette of a large hut in the distance north of the cemetery. The forest seemed to get more dense in that direction also, so my daughter deduced there was a good chance that might be the ogre's home. If she were wrong, she was at least in the forest, and Lalotte had said the house was in there somewhere. Rosella found the hut she was looking for rather easily. Hut is the wrong word for it, however. 2 stories tall, built solidly of large stones with a great thatched roof. It was a large and substantial house. From the look of the oversized doorway and the enormous flagstones leading up to it, she felt confident that an ogre could live there. She'd find out soon enough if it did. My daughter could see nothing by peering through the house's windows. They were set so high off the ground that she could not see into them at all. She decided to walk boldly up to the massive door and simply knock. If she heard anyone out inside, she would bolt for the trees. If there was no noise or answer, she'd steal inside and look around. There was no answer, but there was a very large, very unfriendly watchdog inside. Leaning against the heavy door with all of her weight and strength, Rosella had been able to open it. As she pushed, she heard the dog's growl, and peeking around the door's edge, was able to see it before it saw her. Reaching into her peasant dress, Rosella took out the bone she had been carrying with her for protection, oh, what good that did, and threw it inside to the dog. The growls turned to woofs at once as the grateful watchdog snatched the old bone, and then took it to his spot in the corner of the room, gnawing and licking contently. The beast stopped paying any attention at all to my girl. Some tall tables and chairs were all that furnished the room she had entered, and the only decoration was a stuffed dog's head set high on one wall. A doorway opened on the far side of the room, and from within, Rosella thought she could hear humming and someone moving around. Stairs went up, so did Rosella, on tiptoes. At the top was one room, filthy, containing a huge bed. Where is it? Tattered curtains hung on the windows, and a gaping hole yawned unrepaired on the floor. There was a closet in the room, but it was locked, and Rosella could find no key. A sharp axe leaned against the right wall. She thankfully took it, thinking it might come in handy if the dog got tired of the bone. Back downstairs, Rosella saw another closet just by the open doorway. She crept past the dog and discovered the closet was unlocked. The sounds coming from the other room were now loud, and disgusting smells drifted out. Evidently someone was cooking food there, but judging from the odor, she didn't want to know what was planned for the next meal. Rosella quietly opened the door of the closet and slipped in, closing the door noiselessly behind her. A quick search uncovered nothing, especially no golden egg-laying hen. That's when she heard the second ogre come home, slamming the front door, moving around the house, humming as it went. She was trapped. Willing her thumping heart to be still, Rosella peered out of the closet through the door's keyhole. The ogre was huge, at least twice her own size, tall and broad with a huge black beard, huge black teeth, and huge muscles. With no idea of what to do next, Rosella decided to wait silently until they left the room, perhaps to go to bed. She prayed that they had no need of her hidey hole. She watched them eat, and at one point the man started sniffing the air, telling the woman he smelled something. She assured him it was only the decaying deer she was preparing, and this seemed to satisfy him. When the meal finally ended, the bushy ogre roared to his wife, "Bring me my hen!" Through the tiny hole, Rosella could see a small white hen placed on the table in front of the ogre. "Lay, I tell you! Lay!" Soon an egg began to appear from beneath the poor chicken. It was indeed golden and metallic in color. The ogre weighed the egg in his hand a few times and then put it in a pocket. Moments later he laid his head next to the bird and fell into a contented sleep. His snores rattled the windows. Rosella knew this might be her only chance to escape with the hen. As soon as she was sure the ogre's wife had returned to the kitchen, she opened the closet door, knowing the snores would cover any sound she made. Quickly she picked up the hen from the high table, only inches beyond the greedy grasp of the sleeping giant, and rushed to the front door. Just as she got there, the hen began to squawk. The noise woke the ogre and brought him roaring after her. Without hesitating, Rosella flung the door open and raced outside, the irate ogre screaming after her. Speeding out the door, feeling the ogre's hot breath on her legs, Rosella turned left, east, and fled deeper into the forest, attempting to elude the enraged creature. Finally, despite the hen's constant squawking, she did escape the ogre, and ran right into the arms of even more danger. I do not know how my daughter endured all that she did that day. I am sure I would have gone mad, leaping from danger to danger, to near death, to sure death, to even more danger, one shock following the other so close that it should plunge even the stoutest of heart into gibbering insanity. The young are strong and resistant. They don't think, but know they are invulnerable and immortal. Perhaps that is what kept her going on. Whatever it was, I will always be grateful. Rosella found herself in a thick grove of the oddest trees she had ever seen. All that around her, their branches drooped like zombie fingers, eager to snare anyone that came near. Dim, strange lights seemed to glow dully from within them, vampire eyes by firelight. She stopped short. The ogre had ceased giving chase the moment she entered the strange trees. Hefting her newly acquired axe in one hand, the hen snug in the other, she wondered why. In the corner of her eye, she thought she saw a branch move and began reaching for her. Startled, she swung the axe at the trees, yelling at the top of her lungs as if trying to frighten them. A sudden stillness descended over the odd grove, and the sense of evil she had been feeling lifted. No branch stirred there. All was still and calm again. Rosella wondered if she had been just her overwrought nerves playing tricks. Probably, she told herself, but not believing. That must have been it. Whatever the truth, she met no more menace in the wood, and kept her feet rushing further east toward the impossible mountains. There she discovered the Skull Cave. At least, that's what it looked like. To Rosella, a huge human skull built into the rock of the mountain. The rocks overhanging the entrance hung like teeth, giving the impression that to enter was to enter the maw of death. Smoke twisted up out of the cave through a small chimney, so somebody must be home, she thought. Wrong. Nobody was there. But a black cauldron bubbled over a fire in the middle of the cave. A quick search revealed nothing to Rosella. It was a relief. Leaving the cave, my daughter sped swiftly south along the edge of the mountains. The afternoon shadows had become very long, Night would come soon, and she wanted to be through the graveyard before that happened. She was, and Lalote's monkeys were waiting for her in the usual place. That Lalote was evil made flesh is beyond question. If Rosella had any doubts about this truth at the time, they were cleared up as soon as she was dragged into the wicked witch's presence. The hand had been taken from her by the guards, as had the unicorn. Poor peasant girl, if that is what you really are. I still don't believe you. As Lalote taunted her, the guard held Rosella tighter, lest she try to attack their mistress. I demand of you a final task. Complete it, and all I have promised is yours. Bring me Pandora's box. It contains the purest evil in the universe, and with it I could, dare I say it? Yes, I dare. I could rule the world. Find it and bring it to me. Take her away. Poor wretched Rosella. To find the box for Lalote might doom the world to enslavement by the witch. To not find it would surely doom her father, Genester, and herself, and still give no certainty that Lalote would be vanquished. The choice was between sure death or barest hope. Rosella chose hope, however slim, resolving to get Pandora's box and try to overcome Lalote. She hoped she wasn't making a mistake. Rosella decided to start her search for Pandora's box back at the Skull Cave. There, she had seen a number of containers there containing the raw materials of spell casting, weirdly twisted roots, rare herbs, unnaturally colored fluids, and assorted preserved body parts. Chances were it was the workshop of a wizard or perhaps a witch. If she had no success there, she would revisit the old manor house, and if that proved fruitless, well, she hadn't thought the problem through past that point. My daughter was incorrect in her assumption that a witch might reside in the cave. Not one, but 3 dwelt within. And by the way they eyed Rosella, she wasn't too sure entering the Skull Cave had been a good idea. First of all, they were witches of the dark variety, followers of the left-hand path who used their magical art for evil. Then there was their welcome, cold and cackling, like a spider asking the fly to come into its web. Hello, little girl. Would you like to join us for dinner? One look at their boiling cauldron was enough to tell Rosella just what they intended by that invitation. Lastly, there was the matter of the eye. The 3 crones were blind except for one glass eye which they were able to pass back and forth between them, cupping it like the rarest of jewels in the palms of their hands. The eye was pointed directly at Rosella, held by one of the weird sisters furthest away from the cave's entry. The woman began giving directions to the witch closest to Rosella, and that one started after my daughter. Arms outstretched, fingers writhing, trying to grab her. Rosella knew at once that if she could take the eye from the Dark Sisters, she would have no troubles from them. With their sight as hostage, she might find out the location of Pandora's box. All she had to do was avoid the one who was clutching at her. Because of her youth, Rosella was sure she was quicker than the blind witch. She took a position near the left wall of the cave, slowly moving back and forth a few steps in each direction, enticing the hag to rush her back and forth, keeping a safe distance between them. Rosella's movements were mirrored by the 2 witches in the rear. Back and forth, they passed the eye, always directing the 3rd. Finally, the witch near Rosella made her move, rushing past the cauldron straight for the girl. Rosella darted as quickly as she could from the hag across the cave, past the cauldron, and then straight back, almost hitting the great pot, so close did she pass it. Her rush took her to a spot directly between the 2 hags passing the glass eye. Rosella reached out as quickly as she had run and snatched the eye from them, closing her hand tightly around it. The 3 witches screeched, blind and lost, The pursuing ones stopped and stumbled, unable to see her prey. "Give us back our eye!" they demanded, falling on their knees. "Give me Pandora's box!" was my daughter's reply. "We do not have it! Give us back our eye!" Rosella searched the cave for the second time that afternoon, but did not find the treasure. The hags had been telling the truth. She kept the eye clutched tight so they couldn't follow, and left the cave. Outside, her heart softened. She couldn't leave the witches in blindness forever. With that, she went a little way back inside. The intensity of their pleas increased as the three weird sisters heard her return. One of them threw something in Rosella's direction. It rolled to a stop at her feet. "Take this! It will protect you from the undead!" one cried. "Look for the box among the undead! Give us our eye!" Rosella looked to the ground and picked up a scarab, an obsidian charm, carved in the form of a scarab beetle. She admired its workmanship, and then placed the cool stone against her cheek. She could feel it warm to her touch. "Thank you for the loan of your eye," she told the witches, her business in the cave done. Rosella walked to its edge, then threw the eye to the cave's floor, away from the three crones. She was out of there before the glass hit the ground, sure they would have revenge if they could get close to her again. In that part of Tamir, the dead walk at night. The restless dead, the uneasy souls, the tormented ones. Zombies that tear the flesh and then devour it prowl among the tombstones. Ghosts, the ephemeral ones, haunt the world seeking peace. Night gaunts, d-holes, and ghouls lurk in the darkest places. They wait, they hunt, they feed. Darkness was beginning to take its daily domination of the world. Rosella moved swiftly south to the graveyard. She was not particularly looking forward to the prospect. The night chill was about her, and the sounds of the world scratched claws up against her back. The scarab, now in one of her pockets, began to vibrate softly. Zombies smell of damp earth and decaying things that are best left nameless. That's how my daughter remembers them, and she shivers some when she does. They exploded out of the ground, grabbing at her ankles, holding her legs as they pulled themselves from their graves. Rosella screamed, and the undead backed away in fright. At first, my daughter thought it was her scream that did it, but when she took the scarab charm from her pocket, she could see it glowed with a strong, healthy light. The stone's vibration produced a low hum that had been muffled by her skirt. Rosella thanked the witches under her breath, and was glad she had returned them their eye. Other than the zombies groping hungrily among the tombstones and the locked crypt built into the mountainside, Rosella found nothing in either part of the graveyard. There were no signs anywhere of Pandora's box. She moved on then to the spooky manor, and found that this too had become haunted after dark. A baby's cry startled her as she stepped inside the front door. It was coming from upstairs. Rosella rushed up the stairs, wondering how an infant could have come to the deserted house. The smaller bedroom was as she had left it, as was the master chamber. There, however, the cries came much stronger. Their source seemed to be the nursery attached to that room. She quickly entered it. The nursery was still empty, but the old cradle was now gently rocking back and forth. It was empty, but the cries were definitely coming from it. Rosella was sure she could feel a ghostly presence, that of a dead baby seeking comfort. Perhaps the ghost wailing in the cradle was that of the baby whose tombstone she had read before. Rosella had come across the graves of 2 children, one in each part of the graveyard. An infant had been laid to rest on the western section. Evidently, it wasn't resting very well. Why the child's spirit had returned to the nursery, Rosella didn't know. Perhaps it was looking for something, or someone. The sound of its crying was heartbreaking. Rosella walked downstairs to the parlor. The secret door in the wall was open just as she had left it, and inside that door the shovel still leaned against the stone wall. Rosella took the shovel and left the house. The hag said she might find Pandora's box amongst the undead, so she intended to open the infant's grave and see if it were there. It would be grim work in the darkness. The child's tombstone lay in the northwest corner of the western graveyard, partially obscured by the low branches of an overhanging tree. The stone said the child's name was Hiram, and he had died at the age of 6 months. Rosella read the tombstone and then began to dig. After digging for a few moments, her shovel turned up a small silver rattle mixed with the dirt from the grave. It must have belonged to the unfortunate child. Rosella took it, thinking she would place it in the empty cradle. Perhaps it would quiet the crying ghost. She returned to her digging and reached the tiny pine box holding the baby's remains. She forced herself to open it. It contained the sad remains of the child's burial clothes and his bones, which had been undisturbed until now. That was all she found. She closed the coffin and left. She would refill the hole later. Rosella returned to the house with the silver rattle, dodging zombies all the way. With the scarab protecting her, they were more nuisance than real danger, but their touch was cold, unwholesome, and thoroughly disgusting. Like too many cats in a house, they were always underfoot. The cradle continued its ghostly rocking, side to side. The crying still filled the air. Rosella polished the tarnished toy as well as she could with the corner of her skirt, and then carefully put it into the cradle. In an instant, both the rocking and the crying ceased completely. Peace returned to the deserted room. It was replaced by terrible noises from downstairs. Thus began a series of nocturnal huntings and diggings as Rosella sought to quiet the ghosts of the haunted house, all the time searching for the box she must return to Lalote. From the landing at the top of the stairs, my daughter spied a second ghost, a stooped old man who trudged from room to room, walking through the walls. He moaned loudly, wailing loss and despair. It sounded as if he were howling the word gold over and over and over. Rosella thought the wails would drive her insane if she stayed there much longer. She went grave hunting again in self-defense. After a search of both parts of the cemetery, Rosella dug up the resting place of one Newberry Will. She chose his grave because his tombstone branded him a miser, one who valued gold and treasure above all else, doomed to spend the afterlife shackled with the chains of greed. The grave was on the southern edge of the western graveyard, and after she had dug there, she discovered a bag of gold coins. Nothing else. When she returned to the manor and offered it to the ghost, he snatched it from her and drooled. Then the ghost disappeared, taking with him his wails and moans. They were replaced by the weeping of yet another of the undead. The third ghost had once been a beautiful young woman, tall and slender, with hair the color of midnight. She didn't appear to be much older than my daughter. She was sitting, rocking in the small bedroom, her face buried in her hands. The ghost wore a large wedding band, now wet from her crying. Only once did she lift her face to reveal a large pair of gray eyes, flush with tears. Those eyes looked as if they had stared into infinity and had found it wanting. Then the woman's head sank again into her hands, and the ghostly weeping continued. Rosella found her grave in the eastern burial ground. She knew it was the correct one the moment she saw it. A 19-year-old girl by the name of Betty had died of a broken heart after her lover had perished at sea. Rosella dug and found a little locket attached to a thin gold chain. Engraved on it was the image of a black-bearded sea captain, her husband. Again, she had not discovered Pandora's box. Again, she took a small treasure to the restless dead. I never knew a ghost could smile, but my daughter says this one did. The young woman's weeping ceased the moment Rosella offered her the locket. She took it, held it up, looked at the picture, smiled, and vanished, rocking chair and all. Rosella felt sorry for the girl and her lost love. Of course, that's when she heard new cries of anguish from downstairs. Ghost number 4 looked much like the man etched in the locket, older though, and a soldier from the look of his uniform. He paced despondently in the parlor, peering into corners, under furniture, and behind the few remaining books. Searching, pacing, wailing, the ghost made his futile rounds. One of the ghost's legs had been lost, perhaps in battle, and he had been replaced by a wooden one. The sound of his walking was uneven and wrong. Rosella went to the cemetery to find whatever he was looking for. It turned out to be a medal in the form of a golden cross. Engraved on it were the words, "For valor and bravery." It had been buried along with Lord Coningsby in the western graveyard where he lay next to his wife. Their graves were closest to the house they must have once lived in. Rosella took the Medal of Honor back inside and presented it to the apparition. He took it from her reverently and slowly faded from sight. The last ghost made all of Rosella's frustration about not finding the object of her own quest, Pandora's box, dissolve just like the phantoms she had been encountering. It started differently than her other unearthly episodes. No moans, no wails, no weeps. Just a little boy ghost appearing, teasing Rosella, and trying to get her to chase him. With that, he disappeared into the small bedroom, the one where she encountered the young widow. When she had first explored the manor those many hours before, my daughter had noticed a trap door in that room's ceiling, but no way was visible to reach it. When she followed the boy inside, she found that situation had changed. The trapdoor was now open, and a ladder led up to it. Rosella climbed up into the gloom. The room must have once been the house's attic. It was cluttered with all sorts of boxes and chests, the trash and treasures of a family home. The boy ghost sat there upon a large and interesting-looking chest. Could this, she thought, be Pandora's box? There seemed no way to find out, however. The young ghost wouldn't move from the top of the lid. Ghosts may almost be transparent and ephemeral, but they can be just as heavy and immobile as they wish. Rosella could not budge it. The boy just sat there smiling and giggling, looking at Rosella as if expecting a treat. She walked to the spot where she had crawled onto the attic floor after climbing the ladder, and she climbed the ladder back down. Rosella had no choice but to return to the graveyard. What grave was the boy's? Finally, she located it on the eastern side, a largest stone in the northwest corner. It was the same inscription that had overcome her earlier. It marked the grave of a boy named Willie, who had been buried with a toy horse on wheels. Without a doubt, the child's favorite toy. The shovel broke as Rosella finished digging. She hoped it was not a bad omen. The boy was still sitting on the chest when Rosella returned to the attic, still smiling, still giggling naughtily. She gave the toy to the boy and hoped he would disappear like the others so that she could see what was inside of the chest. This ghost took his time. He looked and grinned merrily at the wooden horse, and finally disappeared with a loud pop. Rosella opened the wooden horse. Rosella opened the lid carefully and then peered inside. Pandora's box? No. All there was inside was some sheet music, old, yellow, and near crumbling to dust. That was all. Carefully she took the brittle pages. As Rosella carefully made her way back down the ladder and headed toward the secret staircase past the parlor, she couldn't help grinning at a riddle I had once told her when she was much younger. What's a ghost's favorite kind of music? All the way up that narrow, treacherous stone stair, she kept chuckling and repeating aloud, "Sheet music! Sheet music! Ghosts like sheet music!" The old joke helped release much of her tension and anxiety. 2 flaming torches illuminated the tower room containing the organ, although how they had been lighted is a mystery. Rosella moved directly to the instrument and played the sheet music on the organ. The melody was deep and somber, the tempo a slow march. As Rosella played, a small secret drawer opened out of the organ's front. In it was a key. After what I've been through, I bet it's a skeleton key, Rosella murmured to herself cynically. She finished playing the music and took the key. She had decided it must be the key to the crypt. After all, she reasoned, it was the only thing in or near the house that was locked. She survived her final trip down the tower stairs and again thought bad thoughts about the person who invented the long skirt. In the front hall, she paused but a moment to see the time. It was almost midnight. Time was running out for her father and Genesta. Then she sped out of the house and straight to the crypt in the mountain. The key fit. Rosella unlocked the door, slowly opened it, and stepped inside to the most elaborate burial chamber she had ever imagined. She found herself on a platform above the tomb's floor. Hieroglyphics were scribbled over all of the walls, and a massive coffin stood in one corner. So colorful and exotic was the place that Rosella imagined it must have been dug into the mountain in the days of ancient Egypt. On the opposite side of the crypt, resting by itself, alone on the floor, was a small box. Pandora's? A rope ladder lay piled at Rosella's feet. She left there for people to climb up and down between the door and the floor. She took the rope and dropped it down, climbing quickly after it. That's when the ancient coffin opened and a figure lurched out at Rosella. The mummy walked heavily for several steps, arms reaching for my daughter. Then it stopped short. Rosella felt the obsidian scarab vibrate more rapidly in her pocket. The undead one returned to its resting place. My daughter sighed with relief. If the scarab had not worked, she would have had no place to flee. The box was not particularly large. It could easily fit in one hand. It was made of some unfamiliar, heavy black metal and decorated with blasphemous shapes. It both looked and felt evil. It was indeed Pandora's box, hidden away and guarded by the mummy for eons. Rosella took the box and climbed out of the crypt. She turned her back on both the graveyard and the haunted house and walked south, knowing Lolote's flying monkeys would find her as she started up the mountain path. She almost welcomed their rough embrace. Lolote was in a frighteningly light mood when my daughter was brought before her for the last time. The evil one asked Rosella her name, and then announced that she was to get her reward, and it would not to be her freedom. No, no. Instead, Lolote had decided my daughter would marry her deformed son Edgar in the morning. Until that time, she was to spend the night in Edgar's room, alone. Then she ordered her goons to strip my girl of all her possessions, leaving but the clothes on her back. Rosella gasped. She faced a fate she thought much worse than death. The black-garbed guards escorted my princess to a room at the top of one of the castle's high towers. They slammed the door shut and stomped back down the stairs. Before they left, she heard the click of the door being locked. And no matter how hard she shoved and pushed, she couldn't budge it open. Despondently, Rosella looked around the tower room that she soon would be forced to share with the witch's son. My daughter had just about given up all hope when she heard a small sound at the door. Not at all like the trampling of the guards. Rushing over to the door, she saw something that had not been there before. A red rose, still fresh on its long stem. Who could have placed it there, she thought. Bending over, she picked it up and brought it to her nose. her eye catching a golden glint. That's when she discovered the little key that had been concealed in the rose's leaves. She took it. Trying it in the chamber door, Rosella heard and felt the blessed click of the lock. She turned the knob, and the door quietly opened. Rosella was free! Now she had to find Lolotte and somehow get the talisman from her. The stairs down were so dimly lit that she could barely see where to put her feet. Slowly and quietly, as silent as a zombie, Rosella made her escape down the cold steps, each one taking her further from her prison. As she rounded the last curve, she spotted one of the monkeys standing guard at the bottom. It looked as if it was sleeping on duty. Rosella hugged the wall as tightly as she could, trying to blend with the shadows, thinking quiet zombie thoughts. The guard still did not move. She crept along, keeping as far away from it as possible. Inch by inch, she came closer to the open archway at the bottom of the tower, and then she was through. She found herself in the castle's cheerless dining room, where a large table and benches covered most of the floor. Rosella imagined this was to be the site of her wedding breakfast. It was a meal she planned to never taste. Another guard was posted there, near two new doorways. It too was nodding in light sleep. The lateness of the hour seemed to be favoring her escape. Rosella continued hugging walls and their shadows as she passed in front of the guard across the room. The first of the doorways she came to led into Lolotte's throne room, but she continued on to the second, within short reach of the flying monkey. Rosella could hear its soft snoring as she went by, holding her breath and wishing herself as skinny as she could. This door led to the kitchen, which was deserted, cold, and with no other exit. Rosella made a silent search of the place, and in one of the two large cabinets, she discovered her stolen possessions. She took them all. She was overjoyed and spent an extra moment caressing Cupid's bow and its lone arrow. Putting her fingers to her lips, Rosella lightly breathed. "Lolotte, this one's got your name on it." She touched her kissed fingers to the arrow's tip and crept out of the kitchen the way she had entered. The guard still snored. Two final monkey guardians had to be passed. The first stood by Lolotte's throne, and she just ran past it, sprinting silently by the bottom of the throne stair. The last guard was beyond the door on the other side of the throne room, at the base of the second tower's stairs, the same tower where she had been taken when she had been imprisoned in the torture chamber. Both of the guards slept. In fact, all she had encountered had been dozing. Could it be that they cared for their mistress so little that they thought nothing of sleeping on duty? She knew not. Rosella had to keep moving if she were to find Lolotte and recover Genesta's talisman. Dawn would come shortly, and the Fairy Queen would die soon after if Rosella were not successful. Up she climbed, terrified of any misstep. Up she climbed, each step she dreamed taking her closer to the witch. Halfway up, she saw light from the hallway that led to the torture cell. She saw guards moving about there, definitely not asleep. That meant up again, to the top of the tower. My daughter suspected that Lolotte kept her private chambers at the top of the stairs, much as Edgar's were at the pinnacle of the other tower. She double-checked the bow and arrow. They were ready for their intended target. Up and up she climbed and arrived at an ornate door, identical with the one in Edgar's room. Shooting someone, however evil they may be, however necessary the act may be, is not a task for the faint or indecisive. Neither is it an act to be performed lightly. Rosella knew that the fate of those she loved, and of our entire world, was attached to the single arrow she carried, just as firmly as the feathers of the arrow's fletching were glued to its shaft. She readied herself in body and mind, breathing deep to slow her heart and steady her eye and hand. She put all her thoughts out of her mind, save for that deed she had to do. She felt neither joy nor fear, just focus and action. The little gold key fit in the lock, just as she suspected it would. Softly she opened the door, trying not to waken the evil witch. Rosella found her deep asleep in her huge bed, easily large enough to hold an ogre and his wife comfortably. My brave child wasted no time in idle observation. She drew the bowstring to her ear, aimed at Lalote's sleeping heart, and shot. The golden arrow of love flew true to its target. Lalote sat straight up from her next to final sleep, Cupid's arrow buried deep in her chest. Agony and pain distorted her face. "Ah!" she cried. "The pain! The pain! I cannot stop the pain!" In her last instant, Lalote saw Rosella standing there, the bow still held straight in front of her. The evil witch made a last effort to rise to get to my daughter, but she crumpled over. "I'll get you, peasant girl! I'll get you!" With that, she finally fell silent, her body stilled, empty of life. Edgar entered his mother's chamber with the dawn. He looked at her body silently for a moment, and then offered Rosella her freedom and the freedom of the castle. He still wore his puppy eyes and looked at my daughter with longing. Then he left Rosella alone. He never looked back at his mother. Rosella found the talisman hanging from a chain around the dead witch's neck. It could only be that, because goodness radiated from it, not evil. She took it and walked out of Lalote's chamber. She had not intended to kill her enemy, merely control her as she had the unicorn, transforming the evil witch with the power of love. Killing the evil one had left Rosella feeling empty and shattered, but it did not totally cover her sense of triumph. The guards bowed to Rosella as she entered the hall halfway down the stairs. They informed her that they had never loved the witch. She had cast a spell over them and forced them to do her bidding. Rosella acknowledged their apologies with a smile and a short nod of her head. The moment was shattered then by the raucous squawking of a hen from behind the door by which she was standing. She opened it. Inside was the hen that laid the golden egg. In the far corner rested Pandora's box. Rosella took them both. It was now time to return the talisman to Genesta and to hide the box again in its crypt to prevent someone else from trying to use its evil. Rosella slowly walked back down the stairs and back through the witch's throne room, vowing never to return. She turned her back on Lalote's throne and walked outside to freedom. Near the front gate of the castle stood a small stable, and Rosella found the unicorn imprisoned inside of it. She opened the gate that confined the great magic beast, and it bolted to its own freedom, kicking and waving its forelegs and neighing in joy. As the unicorn disappeared down the mountain, Rosella wished she were riding it. She didn't relish her own long walk to the sea. My daughter was weary. The strains of the past 2 days had left her mind and body on the verge of exhaustion. She had rested little and eaten nothing since being taken to be sacrificed to the dragon. Oh, how that seemed so far past her at that moment. But she pushed on down, taking extra care not to lose her footing on the dirt path. Once down, it was but a short way to the ornate crypt, where she returned Pandora's box to the exact spot from which she had taken it. Then she closed the crypt door and locked it behind her. Rosella kicked the key back under the door, so no one would ever possess the evil of Pandora's box again. Then she walked the last distance to the sea. The swim to Genesta's island seemed never to end, but my daughter arrived there before her strength gave out. The fairy queen was still in her bed, barely conscious. Praying that she was in time, Rosella gave the talisman to Genesta. She watched Genesta's eyes open wide as the healing powers brought life back to the fairy's face. "You have saved my life, Rosella. Tamir and I owe you a great debt." A short while later, Rosella and Genesta stood on the beach, looking at the hen that lays golden eggs. In her fatigue, my daughter had carried the remarkable hen all the way over the sea from Lalotes. It had squawked and screamed the entire time. Genesta was surprised to see the hen. It had once been hers, but it had been stolen and never recovered until now. The fairy queen could hardly believe her double good fortune. The rest goes quickly. Before returning my daughter home to Daventry, Genesta told her that there was another person who had performed a brave deed and was deserving of a reward. With a wave of her magic wand, poor twisted Edgar was on the beach beside them, blinking madly from his unexpected transport and the bright sun. "Edgar was the one who brought you the key that let you escape. He has a beautiful soul trapped in a horrid body, and I shall make that injustice right." Another wand wave, and Edgar was transformed completely. In place of his deformed body, he now stood straight and tall and handsome. Edgar loved my daughter, he may still love her, and asked Rosella to marry him as soon as he saw that she was there on the beach with him. Rosella looked at him for a few minutes and smiled. "I'm sorry, Edgar. Perhaps we will meet again." She gave him a quick kiss. He blushed. Another wave of the wand, and Rosella's filthy peasant clothes were replaced by her own relatively clean court gown. One last goodbye, one last pass of the magic wand, and Genesta sent Rosella home, bearing the magic fruit that would soon heal her father, my dear husband. My baby was home safe. We both finally cried. That concludes The Perils of Rosella, the 4th installment in the King's Quest series. It was a great step forward for the game series. If you played it, you'll notice that even with it, the standard 8-bit graphics of all the previous games that still held for the most part, they took quite a few steps forward in improving them, if you have indeed played the game before. And they would take even more steps farther with the design of the 5th game. And that story we shall, of course, detail next time with Absence Makes the Heart Go Yonder. Until then, stay rowdy, my friends.